This is Monocle on Fashion, a show on Monocle Radio offering exclusive insights and global perspectives on the fashion industry. I'm Natalie Theodosi, Monocle's fashion director and your host for the show. This week, as temperatures continue to rise and summer holidays approach, we wanted to sit down with Raechel Temily, who has just launched her label, Temily, specializing in the kind of relaxed, ethereal clothing that immediately makes you think of summer and captures the carefree spirit of the holiday season. But it would be too reductive to classify Temily as yet another resort wear label. Raechel, who has decades of fashion industry experience working in communications, branding, as well as crisis management, talks to us about a much bigger vision for artisanal clothing that represents part of the wearer's identity. It can be layered and worn across seasons, and it's designed to be kept forever. She weaves optimism, spirituality, and a very unique vision of beauty into her new collections, appropriately called Theatre for Dreamers and Summer Bones. I loved how she very frankly told me that there is no gap in the market. She started Temily to realize her creative vision and design clothes that make women feel like the best versions of themselves. Plus, her story of gathering ideas and sketches while working behind the scenes for decades and finally taking the leap to launch her brand is an inspiration for any entrepreneur. Let's hear directly from Raechel Temily.
I'm 46 now, and I started in the industry when I was 19. I don't want to do the math on that, but I started working at Milan Fashion Week when I was 19. At the time, I was just bluffing, I didn't know a lot, but I started doing press for one of the designers there in the shows, and I was seeding people. And over the years, I've had my own fashion PR agency. I've worked on clients from the Four Seasons and IHG to Michelin-starred chefs to designers. And I've always considered myself in this support role. And I've really loved doing it. I loved teaching people how to turn their creativity into commercial outcomes. I always thought of myself as everyone's secret weapon. Like if I was doing my job really well, you'd never see me. I was completely invisible. And it felt like a real honor to work with artists and creatives and thinkers and producers that wanted to do something really interesting but didn't know how to get it there themselves. But while I was doing all of this, probably, at least 15 years ago, I had this sketchbook that I would carry in my bag. And I never told a soul because, you start working in the creative landscape, and over the years, all of my friends became very, very successful. At this point, they're magazine editors, they're running Fashion Week, they're, Forbes 30 under 30. So, of course, I'm never going to tell any of my friends in fashion that I've got this dream of perhaps one day doing it myself. Because I wasn't a creative, I wasn't the artist, I wasn't the talent. But I would sketch everything out, I would write notes. I planned the first collection in my head more than a decade ago and never told really a soul. And then I think like a lot of women, we're really comfortable, and I can only speak for myself, but I've also spoken to so many of my friends about this. We're really comfortable backing other people's visions. It's a really comfortable place to be. I wasn't really ready to back myself. And the thought of being mediocre was worse than failing. Like that was a terrible outcome for me. Like if I did something basic, I was never coming back from it. And so about 8 years ago, I started working on a resort wear brand in London. And it was an experiment for me. I didn't put my name on it. I didn't tell anybody that it was me that was designing it. But it was my way of kicking the tires to find out what I was capable of. Because the one thing that I always knew in the back of my mind that would give my life meaning and purpose, which is not something you hear about a lot in fashion, is I was interested in not just me as a woman, but me as a human being. What was I really capable of? If all of the limitations of my mind were gone and I wasn't afraid of failing, what would I really be doing? How vast am I? And so what I did was I started a resort wear brand. I I designed it all. I made it all in my little house in Bali where I was living. Had this little house behind a temple. And I thought, you know what? If I fail, nobody will ever know, right? I can just pretend I had nothing to do with it and move on with my life. It was very, very, very successful. But I exited it within the first 2 years because it wasn't what I really wanted to do. And at that point then, there was this little seed that I'd planted going, okay, I can do this. But I still wasn't prepared to back myself. And so I went back, the pandemic happened, I moved to New York, and I started doing celebrity crisis management, which I sort of fell into, to be honest.
So you've really done it all.
I've done it all. So when I say I'm like a strategist and a brand builder, and I can really put somebody on the map, or in that instance, take somebody off the map. But I always knew I would do this brand. And so it took me a long time in some ways to get back to the beginning.
And it's so inspiring what you say about backing yourself. But also, I think that idea of having a sketchbook while you were doing marketing and consulting and crisis management, because we do pigeonhole ourselves, don't we? On I'm not a creative, I'm a communicator, I'm a backer of other people's creative vision. But I think everyone has a creative streak inside them. So do you find that it is important to nurture it and eventually to let it out and kind of present your vision to the world if you've got that itch?
I think so. And I've been asked a lot in the last couple of months as we finally went live 7 weeks ago, why? Why did you do the brand and why now? And the answer is probably not what you're expecting. It's not that there was a gap in the market. There is no gap in the market. There's so much product out there. It wasn't because I looked at my wardrobe and was like, there were these pieces that were missing. There wasn't. I actually don't even really shop that much, which is an interesting thing for somebody who works in fashion, but I want less, It wasn't any of those things. It was this idea to find out what I was capable of. And it was like a beat of the drum that just got louder and louder. And so eventually, I think years of living in Bali, it's going to sound so cliche. It's so eat, pray, love, and I'm very aware of that. But when I was living in Bali, there's no media, there's no advertising. I was not really on the internet. I didn't have a TV. I'm riding a motorbike through rice paddies. There was no noise from the outside world. And so there was no reference points. I remember the second collection I did for the resort wear brand I was doing. I designed it, I made it, I sampled it, all without really showing anybody. And I remember packing it in boxes to send to Paris, going, well, this is the sword I'm going to die on, because it's either going to go terribly and I really got this wrong, or it's going to be great, but I have no reference points because I didn't take inspiration from anything. I don't know what anybody else is doing in the market. I haven't looked at anyone else's collections. This has come completely from my head. And it sold out really quickly and it went really well. And what it taught me in that moment was, and this is going to sound woo-woo, but I am pretty woo-woo. I own it these days.
Don't worry.
My intuition led me in the right direction. And now what I know is that intuition is energetic language. We actually feel something before we see it. And when it comes into matter, that's the echo. It's actually just the acknowledgement of what we already felt. So living in Bali for those years really silenced all of those voices. It helped to really distill it down and made me think, okay, well, if no one's watching and I'm not paying attention to what anybody else is doing either, what do I have to say creatively then? And that's when things started to get really interesting, because I started to really listen to that voice, and it got louder and louder and louder, to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore and anything else didn't make any sense.
I love that. And I love that you say there is no gap in the market. So it was more
There's no gap in the market.
creative, instinctive pursuit.
But I think another way to phrase the gap in the market is to think about white space. Where is opportunity? I think about it less about there being a lack of something and more about an opportunity, which probably speaks to the way that I approach life, which is more abundance and scarcity. But the white space for me isn't that anything is missing. It's the opportunity to really tap into this feeling or this idea about what women really want to wear and how they want to feel. And one of the things, as I've gotten older and now I'm in my 40s, I came into motherhood a little later. Golden, my daughter, she's 3, and I had her when I was 43. It really changed my relationship with clothes as well. So it distills it down. There's less noise again. You know, I buy less. I buy really well. I know my body. I know what I like. But when you're not the ingenue in the room, right, you're not the heat score when you walk into a room, but that doesn't mean you want to be invisible. Women want to be seen. You know, I often think statement, not spectacle. And clothes have got the power to transform the way we move into a room, the way we move through the world on a macro level. That really interests me. I think that's where the white space is.
That's so interesting. And tell me, how did these thoughts and these feelings manifest into your first collection for Temily?
Such a good question. So I designed, Summer Bones is Italian lycra lined and bound in silk, which is unheard of. I mean, why would anybody line lycra in silk? Bonkers, right? And I know it's bonkers because all of my makers told me so. They're like, this is ridiculous. And also, lycra doesn't want to be bound in silk. The fabrics don't behave well with each other. I had a long laundry list of why it wasn't going to work. But I designed Summer Bones in my head more than a decade ago. I knew exactly how it was going to look. I just didn't know how to make it. And so I took this idea to makers almost 2 years ago, and it took me 6 months to perfect the first dress. We did it again and again and again, and I was told so many times, this is the best we can do. And I was like, it's not the best we can do. I had this idea in my head, and Summer Bones comes down to this idea of, you know, like limbs and skin in the summer. And it came to me many years ago where I'm from Byron Bay in Australia, and for anybody who knows what Byron Bay is like, it's like the closest thing that we on planet might ever have to utopia. You know, we've got dolphins jumping through crystal clear waters and whales breaching everywhere and barefoot children and drum circles. It's ridiculously amazing. And I haven't lived there now for 15 years, you know, but I was back one summer and I was sitting on my favourite beach in the world, Watergoes. And there's these big, beautiful sort of old volcanic rocks on this beach. And you know how your skin gets a little prickly at the end of summer? You know, like you've had a little bit too much sun, but you never want it to end. And I was sitting there at the end of the day and I looked up and I saw this Brahmini kite, which is like an eagle flying over me. And my back was against the hot rocks and it felt like minerals just humming through my bones. That feeling of everything being completely still and just this swoop of an eagle and this golden water. And I was like feeling these minerals just humming through my bones. And I thought, Summer Bones, this is it.
Beautiful, yeah.
And so my references come from these places. It's never it's never formulaic. It's always these sort of in-between moments that get stuck in my head in some way.
And when it comes to, say, the silhouettes that you chose and the shapes, because I like what you were speaking about, women being seen in their clothes and grabbing attention. Was that in your mind when you? But I guess also comfort plays a role because your clothes are quite breezy and kind of laid back. So yeah, tell me about the shapes and that side of the design and how it reflects how you want women to feel.
I love that question. Silhouette really matters to me. So we're living in this age of the moment where everybody's photographed, right? Mm. People are taking selfies. People are thinking about how they're going to look in photographs. It's big main character energy, right? And it's all being documented. A bit like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, did it really happen? If I wasn't photographed in it, I'm going to wear it again. So I think a lot about how silhouettes look editorially and in real life, the movement of them as well. So, and I play a lot with proportions. So things are either tiny, liquid, slinky, or they're oversized, voluminous. I think that's interesting. If something's huge and romantic, it has to have a brutalist sensibility to how it's finished. So it feels a bit more sacrifice than wedding. Which is very me because I'm quite gothic. I like brutalist things. I like things to be dark and moody. I have an altar in my house. I like clothes that feel incredibly symbolic. And I think a lot about, it's one of the taglines for the brand, you know, the body is an altar. Mm. I think the that dressing is very ceremonial. The way as women we wear clothes is such a reflection of our internal landscape. And I think a lot about that when I'm designing and thinking about silhouette. So the clothes are immaculately made. Everything's, bound, French seamed, clean finished, lined. But here's the thing. If the silhouettes aren't incredible, it's on the cutting room floor. If it doesn't shoot beautifully, I don't make it. So I really think about it through the lens of the wearer. And comfort is important. I want clothes to be quite relatable. I don't ever want women to look at a campaign image of Temily and think, oh, that's incredible, but I would need a wind machine next to my bed and a new bag and a new pair of shoes, and I need to cut my hair differently, and I probably need to start going and getting facials. I want a woman to look at a Temily campaign image and go, I could be that woman. I am that woman. I can wear that dress or that skirt or that top, and I already own everything I need to wear it well, and to feel both aspirational but truly relatable really matters to me, because women, we're fed this idea that we're not enough always. We talk about this a lot, I think, in our community, that some way, and fashion speaks to that idea, that principle, that we're not enough, that we need something more to be cooler, to be hotter, to refresh our wardrobe every season with this season's must-haves. But if you stop subscribing to that idea and you already feel enough, clothes represent something else to you. They become an opportunity to not just express yourself, but to feel fully embodied in the physical world. Anyone that says to me clothes are superficial, I always love to have that conversation with people, because I'm like, actually, let's really get into it, because they're not. If you feel that they're superficial, I would actually challenge you on that and say that you feel disconnected to the idea of being really embodied with who you are. Because if you've rejected clothing completely, you're rejecting parts of yourself that are actually not whole and integrated yet, because you are a human being, flesh and blood and bone. And we dress our bodies every day. And so it's an interesting thing for me to lean into, particularly at this point in my life as well. I see it through a really different lens. I've learned over the years of making clothes now, the insecurities and vulnerabilities that women carry with them into their days. The things we want to show versus the things that we want to hide. Clothes have got the power to change the way we walk into a room, the way that we modulate our voice, the way we sit down at a table, the way that we acknowledge moments in our life. All of that feels like ceremony to me.
It's such a beautiful way of thinking about it. But do you think when you look at the industry from a bird's eye view, and given your experience in it as well, we need a reset where more brands and more designers think about it this way versus kind of a more transactional way, which is something that has become much more of the norm?
Just product. There's product everywhere. And I try not to criticize, because I think anybody that's putting something out in the world, I commend them for that. But there is a certain homogenization, which I find very difficult to stomach. Product for the sake of product, landfill. I think about waste reduction and minimization. I think about waterways in marginalized communities who are often the backbone of the fashion industry. But when you get into this, fashion's not sustainable. There's nothing sustainable about it. I think that truly there's only 3 things that we can do to make it fundamentally more sustainable. To lower our negative impact in as many micro and macro ways as we can. But if you've got somebody like Gabriella Hurst at Chloe, who has such an incredible commitment and still can't get there with the backing of such a huge group, how does an independent designer like me have a shot at it without any of those resources, right? So we start with what we have and do the best with what we can. So I think about harm reduction, lowering our negative impact wherever possible. I think about increasing positive impact through, a lot of that is social and community initiatives. And then the third, but the most impactful thing that we can do as well is to increase the longevity and life cycle of our garments so that there is less waste. I don't think people buy clothes because of the commitment to eco-credentials. I have never once looked at a dress and went, well, before I buy it, I just want to know that they are eco-warriors. I will buy a dress because I love the dress. But I think that these principles have to be table stakes. It just has to be the baseline. You know, I had a conversation with Adriano Goldschmidt, you know, the co-founder of Diesel, last year, and he said something really profound to me. We were talking about, you know, denim and, in actual fact, how terrible it is for the environment generally to produce denim. Just the dyes they use, the washes, the chemicals. And so he started building his own factories and creating his own fabrics and denim, and I found it really inspiring. We got really into the weeds on the conversation. And at one point I was like, Adriano, I have to level with you. You're in your 70s. You are the OG. I have nothing to bring to this conversation. And this is a incredible Italian in his 70s, you know, so I just bow down at this point. And I'm like, so why are you even interested in working with somebody like me? And he's like, I'll tell you why. Because you, like many designers in luxury, you're the 1%. And you're designing clothes for the 1% of the 1%. Majority of people will never be able to afford your clothes, even if you make them attainable. The average person's not going to be able to buy a $1,000 dress. He said, but unless you embody these principles at this very pointy end of the market, it's never going to become mainstream. The only way that I can truly affect global change is by these things becoming mainstream. So it's going to take me backing people like you to create this trickle-down effect where it becomes part of the vernacular. I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it. So instead of looking at the industry and the market and thinking doom and gloom and everybody's raping and pillaging the environment and it's all homogenized, he's like, what can we do to start changing that? From the very upper echelons of luxury fashion all the way down to fast fashion. Who are the true change makers? I just found that a really interesting way of looking at it.
And has that become part of your vision for the brand, that it's something that, yeah, it might be addressing the 1%, but you want it to trickle down and have an impact to the broader industry?
You definitely want to become part of the consciousness of the industry, and that's really important. And then, you know, we're all vibration, and so we attract people that see it the way that we do. You know, I was looking for cotton in the last couple of years, and I wanted to find an incredible, like, nubby, soft cotton. Couldn't find it anywhere. Looked at sample after sample after sample for months and months and months. I finally found this incredible brand in Morocco, Marrakchi Life. So I cold emailed Nicholas and Randall and went, I love your cotton. I own 2 of your pieces. They are incredible. Would you consider selling your cotton to me? And Nicholas emailed me back that day and he said, let's get on a call tomorrow. I get on a call with him and I find out what they're doing is so inspiring. They're in a zero waste atelier. They are deeply involved in the community. The cotton is hand loomed on traditional foot looms. They don't even use electricity. I know, it's crazy. They're just dedication to the craft of, you know, the slow food of cotton was so inspiring to me, and they continue to. It's all small batch. It's not easy to replicate on a mass level. It's an expensive way to produce cotton, but it makes people think about it in a different way. You know, I'm so honoured to be working with the boys. I think what they're doing is truly original. It really got my attention, and I feel very lucky that they took a chance on me before I started the brand. I'm a very loyal person. I'll work with them for a really long time. Most people who buy one of my jumpsuits are not going to know where the cotton came from, and they're not going to care. They're just going to look at it and go, I love this really soft cotton. I feel great. I call it my fashion mechanic. Look, you know, but I know where it came from.
And you're building community within like-minded brands, right?
Yeah, and that feels amazing.
Yeah. And obvious question, because you've grown up in some of the most beautiful, sunny places in the world, but does that, like the spirit of summer and that more laid back feeling that you get when you live in a place like that, does that inform your designs, and also the fact that you chose to focus on resort wear?
Oh, definitely.
To begin with.
One of the things I think about resort, I think about it, I frame it less as resort these days, though I know that people like to have a label so that they can contextualize it. initially when I got into resort, I thought about it as being the longest possible season. You know, I thought about it through a commercial lens, actually. You know, it doesn't go on sale for a really long time. Now I see it more as destination wear. Now I think people are traveling all over the world. We're not really thinking about seasons as much anymore. I live in New York and I still wear my summer wardrobe in the middle of winter. I may layer it up a lot for New York's Arctic winters. Most people are getting out of New York for winter. You're going to Puerto Rico, you're going to Mexico, you're in Tulum, you're in the Caribbean over there as well. So people are traveling more. Our lives are looser. Yeah. I think we tend to move now towards, I mean, the word transseasonal is so overused, but I think we gravitate towards a seasonless wardrobe. Might switch my shoes out and some of those accessories, but my core wardrobe actually stays the same. And now I want clothes that work really hard as well. They also have to be really robust and versatile. Like I was looking for metallic silver and I couldn't find any without polyester in it. Apparently plastic, it stabilizes the fabric. And I was like, well, what would it take to make a silver without plastic? Well, it turns out quite a lot. So I ended up making the fabric myself. But one of the things I found really interesting about that, when I looked at the silver and it was just like liquid, it felt like mercury. I was like, this is seasonless. You can wear this in the winter with like a black pump. You can wear this in the summer with an ancient Greek sandal. I loved the versatility of it as well, that I want clothes that I can wear again and again and again. And instead of feeling like, oh, everybody's seen me in this, people are like, I love that dress on you. I remember the last time you wore it. It looks great on you. It's a different way of thinking about fashion.
Yeah. And on that, for someone listening and then just finding out about the brand now, are there favorite pieces and signatures that you would recommend and that you kind of keep returning to and hold on to?
Oh, there is. I think one of my signatures is volume. Mm. And it doesn't matter what your body shape or body type is. Most women feel really beautiful in billowing fabric. Not all women, but most women. And so I really gravitate towards voluminous, diaphanous pieces. So I'm using like sometimes anywhere between 8 and 35 meters of fabric in a dress.
Oh, wow.
I know my makers want to kill me. You know, like bias cut, custom dyed silks in particular. I really love that. This idea that we wear clothes that feel light as a feather, that really interests me. So some of the silhouettes that I gravitate towards are disproportionately oversized. I also like the illusion of skin, like seeming to show more skin than you really are. Most women don't want to show off their upper thighs. Again, there are always exceptions to that. So if there's a thigh-high split, it's cut in a way that it just shows the most elongated, lean part of your leg. It's actually the illusion of showing more skin than you really are. That always really interests me. I'm quite interested also in the idea of, you know, one of the collections is called Theatre for Dreamers. And I think a lot about this idea that as women, there's so many things that are unspoken in us. A long-lost lover, letters that we keep under our bed, poems that we wrote and never shared with anybody, the smell of something that takes you back to a moment that you've never spoken about again. We carry all of these unspoken memories and secrets like treasures within us. Theatre for Dreamers is really about reliving those in a way. There's something whimsical and magical about those pieces where they transport you to a version of yourself that maybe you left behind.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, I'm curious, those early sketchbooks that you were mentioning, did a lot of those ideas start brewing from back then? Because there's so many interesting ideas and emotions that you described that are woven into every design. And it sounds like you've been gathering them for a while.
Like a bowerbird. You know, some of them start with poems. I like to write. I write them in my head before I see them, which is an interesting one. So even when you go onto my website now, it's funny. I just launched it a few days ago, and it represents everything I'm not good at. You know, things like e-commerce and page design and things that I just don't naturally gravitate towards, as everybody who knows me will attest to. And I was like, I want to include some of the poems that started the collection. And they're like, well, that makes it really busy on the page. how about we cut them off? I'm like, no, the words matter because they transport you to something. And even the other night we launched here in London, and on everyone's place settings was the poem that started Summer Bones. And I watched people's faces as they read it, and I saw the emotion move in them. Just sometimes out of the corner of my eye, or, it's just that knowing as I looked across the room when someone took the time to read it, and I saw often quite a visceral reaction where it took them back to something in them that had nothing to do with me. And I think that's where the magic lies, right? This idea of being able to create clothes that are of me, but not for me. Mm-hmm. That women will buy them and wear them and create stories of their own. It'll mean something very different to them. And so it feels in some ways like as I design them and make them, like they're off living their own lives,
I love that. And I think that's a very feminine way of approaching design because you think beyond yourself and your own vision, which is interesting and not as common, I think.
Well, women designing for women.
Yeah.
Even our fit model process, of course I have professional fit models. I have to get the measurements of certain sizes right. But I'm also bringing in a lot of friends of the house as well who have very different body types and shapes that might all buy the same size because technically they fit into that range or that spectrum. But if it doesn't look great on lots of different body types, we go back to the drawing board. It can't just fit one perfect body. And I see it as a puzzle to try to figure out. And I think that is women designing for women. I mean, you know what it's like when you put something on and you have to fuss with it. You're adjusting it, you're moving, you're pulling it out, and it really detracts from the feeling. But if you put something on that you can completely forget about, because it fits like a dream and it moves really beautifully as well, it does change your presence in the room because you're not distracted anymore and you're actually able to come in with full presence. So it does, I think about that and how it allows women to fully embody their power.
And tell me now that you've launched on Model Per Andy, you've launched your own website as well. What has been the conversations and the feedback from these women that I'm sure you've been talking to and spending time with?
Well, I will be absolutely honest. I was really nervous about launching. I had a conversation at the end of last year with somebody who looked at Summer Bones and they were like, ooh, sportswear, athleisure, that's brave. And I just was like, what? And I really second-guessed myself. I was like, oh, my God, I thought it was cool, but you hate it. Maybe I've really misread this. But at that point, I was too deep to stop, so I just had to keep going forward. And so the day that we dropped on Model Operandi, I was really busy. I'm a working mum. I've got a 3-year-old. My husband was away working in Australia. I was moving house. I had a dog. It was just a lot going on that day. So I didn't even look at the website. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of emails that were more and more frantic in a way, going, we've sold out overnight. I'm like, what? Amazing. And so we all get on a call and I was like, just out of curiosity, what sold first? And they went, oh, Summer Bones. That went within hours. We sold out twice that week before the New York launch. And then, funny story, fast forward to a couple of days ago, the website's just had a holding page for 6 weeks. I've been very, very busy and distracted, obviously, with just trying to launch this in 2 countries. A couple of days ago, someone said to me, listen, you really need to find the password for that inquiry email on the website. I was like, I don't know what it is. I got locked out of the account. Nobody knows what it is anyway. It's a landing page. Well, how wrong was I? I finally opened it up a couple of days ago. Hundreds of emails in there from women wanting to buy the clothes. Hundreds. The tiered gown, we've got this big, huge black sheer tiered gown, which is actually quite brave because it's very see-through. I did not anticipate the demand on that dress. And there were women just increasingly desperate, being like, I need it in 2 days. I'm going to a wedding. Can I call you? And I'm like, I just start, that nervous laughter when you realize you've really misread a situation. So far the response has been really incredible. And women also just DM me pictures of themselves in the clothes, just to my personal account. And they're like, look, I bought this on Moda and I love it and I'm wearing it this weekend. Or I've had some women in the last couple of weeks reach out and go, what kind of shoes would you wear with this? And I'm little enough now to respond to everybody. So the response has been incredible. I'm very, very humbled and very relieved.
That was Raechel Temily. Her label is available to shop at Moda Operandi and her newly launched e-commerce platform. And that's all for today's show. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. We have more big interviews as well as Fashion Week briefings coming from next week. Today's episode was produced and edited by Lily Austin. I'm Nathalie Theodosi. Thank you so much for listening.